Hello and welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by Bob Ferrante and Kurt Weiler. What's going on, guys?
Keep them busy. Happy Jump Day.
Yeah, it's that time of year when everything's overlapping, man.
Yeah, it seems like everything is definitely overlapping, and that's going to be. We're going to talk about several of those things. We're going to talk football, baseball, basketball, possibly some softball. We're also going to talk about the fact. Start out the show with the fact that FSU spring practice overlaps with the portal. So good that you got a perfect segue, Kurt. Thank you for setting me up. You teed it off like a USF fastball for me. I appreciate that. So we'll talk a little bit about the Noles blowout win against my former employer, the USF Bulls. Wasn't a game, boys. I watched some of it on my phone, and it was over before it started. Of course, Bob and Kurt will also talk a little bit about what they heard from the coordinators on Monday night as they got the Tallahassee Seminole Boosters Tour. And so it'd be interesting to get y'all's thoughts on that. But we are going to start with the portal since it opened up today. Obviously, Mike Norvell addressed it yesterday in his press conference. They are actively having conversations with current players. He obviously said that they are entertaining, bringing in players from outside the program, which we thought might happen. Now, when I looked at you guys' number for roster, 101's, I think where we have it. So they've already got room for 4, and we know they have some position needs. But right now, kind of slow on Florida State's end. Only 3 players currently have entered or intend to enter the portal or have entered the portal. Trevor Jackson, who we've talked about, Jalen Early, who we talked about, and then last night or this morning, wide receiver Jordan Scott, who's been in the program 4 months, has entered the portal. And, listen, guys, this one surprises me for a couple of reasons. A, he's been in the program 4 months. B, it's, to me, a shallow receiver group. I don't think they're very deep at receiver. Certainly not developed and polished at receiver outside of Squirrel Wright. Now, we know Deuce Robinson has a ton of potential, but he's only got 23 catches in his last year, so still a long way to go. But listen, I'm going to get y'all's thoughts on it. First of all, my first question to both of you guys, and is it a good or bad thing that Florida State is still in spring ball with the portal opening and they still have 2 more practices to go? Does that help them, hurt them? I know Mike Norvell said that, having the ability for the new coordinators to evaluate the roster and also dip into the portal is good. But they got to work with the kids they have here. That's the catch-22 of it all. But what do you guys think? Should Florida State have gotten out of spring ball before the portal business opened?
I'm okay with it. I mean, I'll be honest, they're not practicing today on Wednesdays. I think that gives them probably a full day to focus on what might be the busiest day as far as just guys jumping in today. And we can talk about some of those prospects too that they may have a prior relationship with. They might be reaching out to some guys literally today and trying to, set up a visit, see if you're interested. But I'm with you, Pat. I get why a lot of programs did have their spring games or whatnot last Saturday. It does make sense that, some coaches were looking at that calendar and thinking about that.
Yeah. What about you, Kurt?
Yeah, I think you can see why, but I tend things are somewhat scaling down. I mean, the helmet practice, I think it's a helmet lighter practice tomorrow, scrimmage on Saturday. They'll be done soon. You could make a case for it maybe not being great, that with how fast the portal moves, it can't be their full attention the next couple of days. They got to kind of balance it a little bit. But I mean, I think they often have done their research of hearing who might be in the portal and kind of things like that, getting advance notice where they're not getting caught totally off guard across the board this morning. That type of thing.
No, I agree with you on that. I do not think they're getting totally caught off guard, and I think that they clearly know who they're going to target in the portal if they go in. If a kid from another program goes in the portal, they clearly know they have a plan. Now there may be a couple of surprises, but yeah, I think this is another problem with the NCAA calendar. These things should not exist at the same time, just like the same thing with bowl games in the portal in the spring, in the fall. So I agree there that, listen, with 2 days, is that big a factor? No, because we all know these conversations are taking place well before the portal opens. If I see tampering on Twitter one more time, somebody complaining about it, everybody does it. If you're not doing your job as a college football coach, if you're not tampering, that
wasn't even my point.
The job.
That wasn't my point. More.
No, I'm just saying. I was moving on.
Yeah. They're talking to agents about people might be entering the portal. It doesn't mean they're setting things. I mean, I will say, like a Jaden Ott yesterday, like who less than 24 hours after entering the portal from Cal committed to Oklahoma, is like one of the bigger examples I can remember of like, oh wow.
Well, yeah, I guess my point was more so that the 2 days overlap probably doesn't matter because most of these conversations are already taking place. And my point was, I keep on seeing the word tampering on Twitter, and I'm not talking about Florida State necessarily, but listen, these conversations, folks, are taking place well before the portal opens. They've been ongoing for months. As my brother, who worked in college football for 25 years, said, players are free agents round the clock as long as this semester by semester free agency exists. All right. So I want to talk to you guys about Jordan Scott because we have some differences of opinion within our staff about whether this is a big deal or not a big deal and whether we should be surprised or not surprised. Well, my argument would be that it is a big deal for two reasons. A, in some form or fashion, or really the biggest, in a vacuum by itself, it's not that big a deal. It's one player going out of the program. And it's a program, either the kid did not fit on and off the field, or from a personality standpoint, just wasn't a good fit, whether it be the school, the staff, the offense, whatever. Or he couldn't play. In either case, there is a misevaluation here, guys. And if we go back to the last 2 years, this is an ongoing problem at Florida State. That's why I think it is a problem that it was a missed evaluation, hopefully more so off the field than on the field, because this is a kid that with the lack of depth at this position group, from what we've seen, listen, all we hear is Deuce Robinson, Squirrel Wright. We don't hear a lot about other receivers on this team. Now, we've heard McCoy from time to time. He's been beat up. We've heard a little bit of Jaylen Brown, who's got a lot of maturing to do based off some of what we saw last year. But to me, it's the fact that here we are. If it's an evaluation problem with this kid who was supposedly one of the top junior college wide receivers, they raved about him when they signed him. I would have tried to find the quotes that Mike gave on Jordan Scott after he signed. I could not find them. I wanted to talk about that. But guys, my issue with Jordan Scott is not what it does that one particular guy does to the receiver room. And I agree with Fish and I were having a discussion on the board today. At least the April spring portal period gives you a chance to erase the mistake, which is good. And we also, there's already two receivers on Florida State I'm reaching out to, and we'll talk a little bit about those guys later. But what do you make do you think by itself, I don't think it's a big deal. In the grand scheme of things, I think this Jordan Scott, I think it's something to pay attention to. What do you guys think?
I think your second point is the more valid point. I think the thing is, Mike talked last night about, he kind of said something to the effect, and this is a couple of hours after the Jordan Scott news broke and he'd been removed from the roster, of saying, like, I don't expect many transfer portal surprises, kind of like. So that to me read of like he wasn't caught off guard by this. It's not to say he fully moved on from the kid, but it feels like it maybe was a mutual thing, or who knows what, of just like, but you're right. I mean, I think that in and of itself doesn't concern me. And I think some people would say it's an encouraging sign for Mike to maybe be quicker to be willing to move on from someone who he doesn't see as a fit in whatever way he may not have seen him as a fit. As to, I feels like he's maybe a few guys held on to too long. I mean, you can make a case for the last year's receiver room. He held on to a few guys too long and let them finish out their careers at Florida State when maybe he shouldn't have done that. However, you're right. I think the eval, that's a position Mike played, when he knows receivers, he likes coaching those receivers at practice. I wonder how much more he's doing it now that he's not calling plays for the offense. That's kind of not his primary duty. I wonder, that is a more interesting thing. I mean, it might have just been you take a shot on the trait and it doesn't play out. I mean, he's 6'7", but a 6'7" guy was in JUCO for a reason. Whether that was grades, whether that was he was a bit raw, there was a reason he went JUCO out of high school. And whatever that reason is, it seems like it's still a thing that might keep him from breaking the rotation at a place like Florida State. And I mean, the depth isn't great, but the two things I would point to are, A, you look at Gus Malzahn's track record at UCF, he didn't use an especially deep receiver rotation. He shrunk that compared to how the rotation we've seen Mike Norvell use. And also, I mean, you're right. Does it mean they see something that you could pursue in the spring window? Obviously, yep. It'll be harder getting in post spring to bring in a receiver who can play right away, but you can't rule out the possibility. And I think, especially with a JUCO guy who's got more limited time than a freshman you're bringing in or some of the younger transfers you're bringing in, if you don't see it working, I mean, I think it's hard to argue with the move now. It's maybe more the front end, the evaluation that's concerning.
Yeah, I think, and listen, I think that's why it's something to. At least it made my ears perk up, kind of thing. Like I said, in a vacuum, Bob, it didn't bother me. But when you start thinking about what we saw last year with most of the kids being misses that they took in the portal, outside of maybe Sione, I'm sure that you guys can help me with a couple of others that were decent players on a bad football team, but there weren't many of them. Most of the portal guys last year were somewhat disappointing. Of course, we didn't get to see much of Roydell. We'll see how that turns out this year. All right, so Bob, you got anything to add to the Jordan Scott conversation?
I'd add on two things. I think you guys hit on a lot of good points. We don't know what we don't know yet with Jordan Scott. He hasn't been willing to talk. I've reached out to him a couple times, not responded. The other thing I think it's really interesting, we don't know what these NIL contracts look like either. I'm operating under an assumption that he signed some document that lasted longer than just a semester with Battle's End, right?
Yep.
What are the repercussions of Jordan Scott's just saying before spring practice is even over, hey, I'm out of here. It's not working out for whatever reason. It's a really wild set of circumstances because, again, who's advising him, parent, agent, whatnot? Is there a signed document that might be binding him for some length of time? There's a lot of questions that I have, but this is a really weird circumstance. We haven't seen something quite like this where it's been such a quick arrival and then such a quick departure.
Listen, he's not the only one. There was a kid that signed with Missouri out of Nebraska that visited here, Gabor, the Gabor kid who's now committed to North Carolina within 2 days. So that happened pretty quickly. But, yeah, so he's not the only one. But, yeah, I do think it's interesting. And, listen, it's at the end of the day, it's a zero game for Florida State because he hasn't done anything for this program. He's only been here 3 months, but it did caught me off guard because, listen, we hadn't heard his name.
I'm not sure once. I was remarking that somebody yesterday. I'm not sure Mike talked about him once this spring.
In fact, we've heard Willie Soares 1,000 times more than we have heard Jordan Scott, or for that matter, Hakeem Williams, who's another kid we have not talked about. And so what I want to do is I kind of want to move on to Mike. Obviously, now we thought they were over. One time we had him at 106 or 7. Obviously, our number has been adjusted back down to 101. But there are going to probably be some guys that will transfer out of the program, as Mike has alluded to. So let's just start with let's go position group by position group, and we'll start with quarterback guys. Obviously, Castellanos, unless he pulls a Nico, is here. I'm not worried about Kevin Sperry. I would hope, because of what he said a month or so ago, that Brock Glenn would not jump in the portal, or I will lose I will be cynical as hell about the portal from here on out, and anything a kid says. I'm already that way about the coaching staff because they say so much, and sometimes we see what they say, and sometimes we don't. But now we have to take them at their word because we're not there. All right, so any chance that Florida State loses a quarterback in the portal?
I don't think so.
On top of Trevor, I don't think so. No, like Trevor is, I think, the one from that group, and he wasn't a scholarship player.
All right, I agree. All right, so running back. It's not quite a crowded room as it will be in May when Usman Kroma arrives on campus. We've heard Mike talk about most of the backs in some form or fashion. Most of it has been Roy Dell. Is there any chance that we see a Keziah Holmes or Sam Singletary or Cam Davis jump in the portal?
I think with Keziah, just there is the potential for more production than what he's shown. There's potential he can take on more carries. I legitimately think he can be a group of 5 teams, number 1 or number 2 back. Like, legitimately, if he wants that, he can go get it. If he likes being at Florida State, if he likes wearing the garnet and gold, I'm happy that he wants to stay here. Yep. It's a choice.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, you wrote a story, Bob, of like running back being in a position they could target. I mean, if they don't want potentially their workhorse number 1 back to be a true freshman who only arrives over the summer, they might add someone who kind of has a little more proven experience. And especially if that happens, you wonder if anybody picks up on that as a possibility, if that changes the nature of that room, the complexion of that room.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Kurt. I was not thinking that coming into spring, but after we left the scrimmage the other day, I thought, well, this team could get better if it dipped in for a running back. Now, there's not a ton of running backs in the portal right now. LJ Johnson from SMU is in the portal, but he was a backup at SMU. Now, listen, Mike's going to play a ton of backs. I don't know if you need a 25 carry a game workhorse because that's not been Mike's MO, not at Florida State anyway. So I definitely think you could see an addition or subtraction here. And listen, is it a chance for Keziah to go find a place to start at a group of 5? I agree with you. I think it's the most obvious choice there. Sam, I don't know. I think he'll stick around for a year. At least another year, see where he fits into this offense. He's obviously a guy they're going to feature on special teams. We saw what he did against Duke on the return for a touchdown. He's got blazing speed, straight line speed. So I hope they hold on to Sam, but I could see one leaving and one entering via the portal. Now, obviously, we know we've got a hole at wide receiver. They have a roster spot that's unaccounted for with the expected departure of Jordan Scott. I guess they could get that worked out. It certainly doesn't sound like it. But do you see anybody else leaving out of this room for the portal, out of the receiver room? And I think they will try to add a portal guy. But what do you guys think about the room as it exists today? Will we see someone that maybe we're not expecting, but the staff is expecting to jump in the portal? And who do you think those candidates are?
I mean, we saw Nykar in high school. Let's be honest. Nykar, Moultrie, Colquitt County, teammate of Landon Thomas. Nykar is a special electric football player. Went to Miami. For one reason or another, it didn't work out. I would be definitely trying to line up a visit to bring Nykar into Tallahassee. I'm sure Georgia is too. I'm sure a lot of schools are very interested. Now, will somebody from Florida State leave?
Yeah.
I'll be very honest. To me, it feels like the seniors and the departures have already happened. Like Malik Benson going to Oregon, the seniors like Jakai and Kentron and Darion moving on. It feels like that's already occurred in December to me.
I don't want to blindly throw out names. I think the only circumstance I could see is if there's someone who can see they're a little buried on the depth chart and might want to go somewhere where they have a better chance of being higher up on the depth chart. But I don't have a name of who that would be.
Well, listen, I do think there's also where they are in their career. Are they a third-year guy that hasn't produced very much? Yeah. I do think there are some names in that receiver room that fit that mold. That, listen, if they're not getting it done coming out of this spring, is it time to, have that real conversation that Mike has talked about. And listen, to be quite honest with you, is Hakeem Williams one of those guys? He came in with a great amount of fanfare. He does not seem to be the number one guy at any position right now. We've heard about, and listen, we're not, this is all, everybody's a free agent this semester. They got 10 days to do it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about guys that may be at a point in their career where it's time to prove yourself or move on. And I think this is a very important spring. And if he stays with the program, fall for him for sure. So I do think it's all right to talk about where these guys are in their career and what they have or have not done. Now, the guy I would like to see that's in the portal now that Florida State pursue is Trevor Pena from Syracuse, who was second team All ACC. He jumped in the portal last night. He had 84 receptions for 941 yards. He's also a return guy for them. And he is a guy that would automatically become your number one receiver just based off production in his career, because he's got almost four times the catches that Deuce Robinson does and twice the number of catches that Squirrel had last year at Tennessee. So and of course now Fish and I had this conversation on the forum. He thinks they don't have enough money because they got money tied into Akeem. They made a big commitment to him financially, according to Fish. So to me, if you're going to go after somebody, you need to go after a difference maker for this offense, and I think he fits the mold. Now, listen, we don't know if he's got interest in Florida State. I'm sure Florida State would have interest in him if he was open for conversation.
I'm with you in that if they were adding anyone in the spring, especially kind of the offensive skill positions, it feels like it would be somebody proven. Spring isn't the time where you take the kind of maybe become somebody type of transfer. And Pena certainly fits that mold. You're right. The thing we won't ever know, like have firm details on, is the money side of it. I mean, the problem if you're Florida State is the spring also when coveted like players are a little more scarce, is that the asking prices are going up. Like you're not, you're probably paying more for the same player now than you were in January. The players have a little more leverage probably in that situation. So we don't know exactly where the financial situation is on that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, I think to Bob's point on Nye Carr, I think if we're sitting here 2 years ago with the portal, and and I'm not saying there is a decision to be made between Nye Carr and Pena. Just hypothetically, if this happened 2 years ago, I think they're totally in on Nye Carr. But we've heard Mike talk about going from a potential versus production thing, and obviously production is Pena, potential is Carr. So I think this year, if they went after one of the two, now listen, to your point, to Fish's point, Pena is going to demand a lot of NIL because he's productive. He's got a proven track record and was the top playmaker in an improving Syracuse program under Fran Brown. So yeah, I think that the dynamic of what they're doing and how they're doing it at Florida State might lead to them going after Pena first. But listen, you saw Carr in person, Bob. I saw Carr in person at his high school when we went to watch Landon Thomas, and we thought Georgia was definitively the program, and he ends up going to Miami. And I think Fish said he had 8 catches last year at Miami and about 10 games, so he didn't play a lot. But yeah, I've got those two. I started a board post talking about potential guys that could potentially be interested or Florida State could have interest in. Both of those guys are on that list for those very reasons. One, Carr was recruited heavily by Florida State, and 2, Pena is highly productive in the ACC, and obviously Florida State's very aware of who he is, although they didn't play Syracuse last year. All right, tight ends. I don't think I see any departures from this room, guys, but I think that they need to add, if there's a guy that can come in, and to that point, so far, I have not found a guy that I'm just like, all right, I need to investigate this guy more. I need to see. Now, we'll see what happens over the next 7-8 days. But tight end, I don't see anybody losing in that going out of that room. Do you think they need – we don't know. There's not a great prospect out there. Do you think they need to add to that room Kurt.
If the right blocking first tight end came along, that would probably be what I would lean. I think on the receiving front, they're actually pretty good on that front. And I actually liked what I saw from some of the tight ends when we were out there blocking wise at the scrimmage. But I think if there were a true block first tight end, I think that could be something. I'm not sure playmaking, they need another one.
Yeah. All right. Bob?
Yeah, I think we talked about this Monday too, right? You want that kind of versatile guy who can do a little bit of both the pass catching and the blocking. I think the coaches are very, very happy with the 4 tight ends they have in this room. Just from a numbers standpoint, it would be great to have a 5th.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move to the offensive line. Now, I think there's a small pool of candidates. And listen, we thought Bryson Estes looked better in the scrimmage than he had in a while. I thought he did than he did last year. And I had that conversation with somebody else from another FSU site, and we both agreed they looked better. I think Bryson, depending on where he ends in the post-spring depth chart, and listen, they may not post a post-spring depth chart, guys, but these guys know where they are. All right, so I think Estes, if he's not in the 2 deep, or doesn't feel like he's in the 2 deep, I think he's a potential guy. I would say the same thing for Jacob Rizzi and possibly TJ Ferguson. Now, Mike's talked about him a lot and talked about how tough he is this spring. Maybe Herb Hand's gotten to him because that was not his MO last year. Those would be my 3 guys. I would hope that they're able to hold on to Simmons and Daniels and a TT and Todd and Hilton, because they do look like promising prospects coming up the ranks and have a year to season with Hanson, Medley, Petitbon, Pettis, and Richie Leonard being the starters. What do you guys think about the offensive line room?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn here. I mean, honestly, does the Jalen Early departure make a Bryson Estes or a Jacob Rizzi feel better about their path to some playing time at guard? You know, again, you're always an injury away here from somebody in that backup role being very, very needed. So I again, as I'm trying to count dependable guys, I'm trying not to count dependable guys in April, but to some extent, I think I am counting dependable guys in April.
Right.
It feels like I'm trying to say, okay, who's dependable, and you're starting to see, okay, who could be on that list. So don't want to see guys move out that we think could be among those options.
And when you're talking dependable on the offensive line, you want 8 to 10 of those guys. It's not just 5, because almost never. I mean, that 2013 FSU team that made it through the whole season with the same 5 starting offensive linemen is the anomaly. Is not.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I think, though, you're right. I think, Pat, it's a good point, especially at offensive line and receiver. You talked about the awareness about the post-spring depth chart, even if it's not kind of official, the guys know where they stand. That has to be especially true at offensive line and receiver, where they were banged up and pretty depleted with injuries and have gotten healthier here late in spring, which guys have maybe seen reps reduced pretty seriously as guys on the offensive line or at receiver have gotten back out there and been available after they were out for a while. That probably is pretty telling to them.
Yeah, and listen, I think I go back to Jalen Early. Bob and I talked a little bit about on Monday. I don't think at face value this is a big deal unless they start getting a lot of injuries on the offensive line next year, because he had so many reps compared to the rest of the returning offensive linemen. He had 6 starts, probably. I'm going to say, I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to say he played 400 snaps last year, which puts him, I think he was second in the returning offensive lineman behind, not behind Leonard, but behind TJ Ferguson, because Leonard only played 4 games. But yeah, I think that's where the departure of a Jalen Early, you don't feel it now, but you could feel it next year if they go down. If you have one of those guards or tackles goes down for an extended amount of time. All right, so let's move over to the defense. Defensive front, guys. There's a guy in the portal now that looked like an All-American against Florida State last year at Doak Campbell Stadium. His name's Bo Atkinson. He single-handedly crushed the offensive line in that game. He had 3 sacks in a quarter or a half and a ton of pressures. He's in the portal. I would like to see them go after him because I think he's a guy that makes this defensive line better. And I say this, and one of the reasons I say this is we've heard a lot about 2 early enrollee true freshmen. All right. So does that speak to their true potential and a current ability, or to the fact that Florida State has been practicing with a beat up offensive line and missing most of its starters? So, and it's hard to depend on a true freshman on the front, either offensive line or defense. You got to be a real freak and large athlete to make a difference as a freshman on either front, on either side of the ball. So I would, if you got a guy like Bo Atkinson, and there's several edge defensive tackles, and I've got to go back through the names tonight, but do you see anybody leaving off the defensive line, and do you think they should add to this defensive line?
I think the market's going to be very expensive, very competitive for defensive line. I think we know that historically. That's the big problem, is like, we can say that Atkinson would be great for Florida State. How many other schools are going to say the same thing about their program too?
Right.
I think the answer to your Desir twin question is yes. I think they're capitalizing on some injuries on the offensive line, but I think they've also looked really good. I think they've had that requisite edge that Mike Norvell has talked about. So some of this, I think, is maybe good spring storylines. You know, spring is good to hear about player development, even though we know they're not going to play in the fall. Let's be honest, they're probably not going to play a ton in the fall. They could play 4 games. The redshirt rule is awesome. That's why we love it. It's an opportunity. But honestly, I just think the market at defensive line is just going to be incredibly high.
Yeah, I agree. Kurt?
No, yeah, I think that's true. It maybe more than any other position. I think that's always a place that is competitive and tough to add at. It's, I mean, I think talking to a few people in the agent community, you know, they say that a bunch of coaches are always asking them about defensive linemen and what defensive linemen they have available and things like that. So when you already, especially when you're Florida, I mean, you already added 3 in, or no, you added 4. Just 1 was out for spring. Jason Jenkins has been out for spring. I think it's hopefully expected back over the summer, but you've added 3 in the spring, who sounds like all 3 have been pretty impactful in James Williams, Deontay McCray, and Diamante Diggs.
Yeah, listen, I can't wait to see McCray play football next year. I mean,
he's a dude.
I'm excited about that. The only guys I had listed down as potential transfers were Jaden Jones, Hester, and Flagg, just because we haven't heard a lot about them. They haven't played a lot of football. And listen, part of this, you know, listen, I read a quote by Nick Saban. 70-80% of his players, recruits, are on his, I believe he's talking about on his roster. This is a quote back in spring of 2024. They want assurances to know how much they're going to play. And they also want to know how much they were going to make. Now, so most of the guys we're talking about are not money guys. We're talking about playing time guys, right? I mean, that when you think about leaving the program and wanting more playing time. Now, listen, I don't think they have very many body types that fit the jack. I think that may be the one thing that keeps Jaden Jones here. Now, of course, it doesn't matter if you have the body type and can't rush the passer, but he's also been hurt the vast majority of his career at Florida State. So we'll see what happens, and that probably hurts his value in the transfer portal market. So that's, as I taught myself, I'm talking myself out of that one. So this is good group therapy here, guys. But now Hester's weird. I don't know how I didn't think he was an ideal fit for a 4-3 defense or 4-2-5 as end. Maybe he's a little bit more Dwight Freeney-like in a 3-3-5. We'll see. But those are just 3 guys that I had down. And then in the secondary, I just don't see anybody leaving, guys. I mean, they seem high on all of them. Bob and I talked last week about Hussey potentially. You know, we thought he might not be here coming out of last season. He seems to turn the corner. So what do you guys think about the secondary room and what they could do through the portal there?
I am inclined to think it's like the moves made there would have happened or did happen in the winter. I think I'm with you of like, I didn't think Conrad would be on the team in the spring, but because he was still here, I mean, the only case I guess you could make with the questions about Conrad was that someone who Mike said coming into spring, I need to see it from you this spring. Show me that you want to still be on this team and be on the team for the 2025 season. And unfortunately, Conrad was hurt and missed the entire spring. You know, I mean, Shaheem, I guess maybe a similar boat. It sounds like he made it back for the back half of spring, but they're certainly not in a place. I mean, with needing essentially 3 safeties now, that Rover is like, it's a safety linebacker hybrid, but safeties are going to be playing that role. Earl Little's been working there, you know? So I think with needing 3 safeties now, you're not exactly at a place to be chasing safeties off. And I think similarly at corners, I mean, that's a spot where with so little lockdown, I mean, you lost 3 starters there. I think that it's wide open, and it feels like I bet there's less firm of a pecking order there coming out of spring. I mean, that might scare guys off.
I agree with you there. I think this is the battle in the secondary is going to continue, maybe outside of Earl Little. Now, I would, if you found the right guy, go after a safety because, listen, some of these guys, based on what we saw in this one scrimmage, which I told you there's going to be an overreaction from everybody, including me, is that some of these guys have not gotten better at tackling. And I think that if you could go find a guy, now listen, I have not seen an experienced safety in the portal. The name guy right now is the Urlacher kid from Notre Dame, who was a 4-star prospect. Now, he's going to catch a lot of attention because of his last name. He's the son of Brian Urlacher, one of the greatest defensive players in the history of college football or professional football, for that matter. He has left Notre Dame because they are so crowded in the backfield, the defensive backfield, if you believe what is written, right? I mean, at the end of the day, who the heck knows? But I would like to see them go after a safety because I do think that they need with 3 safeties back there, because that's what this really is two safeties and William wants them to go after Zaquan Patterson, who's in the portal. We'll see how that goes.
It's a name familiar with Florida State fans.
That is the name. But both of those guys,
unproven. It's not a guy who you're expecting to be a day one starter without a doubt because he didn't play a ton as a freshman at Miami.
Yes, and that was good. I was getting ready to say, and that goes back to our earlier conversation. Now we're back to production versus potential. And listen, I think that Mike that shift that he's made is probably right, specifically for this year being so important to his future at Florida State. So I think that they would be less apt to go after a young guy. But if the right guy jumped in as a safety, I think that you could probably bring in a guy that could come in and compete with Shaheem and Ashland and whoever else they've got at safety right now. Conrad, KJ, although it sounds like KJ's had a pretty good spring. But I do think I would go out and get a safety if there was one that you felt could come in and at least play half the snaps at whatever, whether you're putting them at rover, strong safety, or free safety. But I would go after a safety based on what I saw in the scrimmage and previous track records. But all right, do we go after a kicker, long snapper? I saw a long snapper enter the portal today.
They got a kicker / punter arriving this summer, Bruno Reus.
That's right. We've also got Jake.
So that's kind of like a portal edition. Yeah, you already got a kicker and a punter, so you got 2 of each in a way.
No. All right, so we feel pretty good about the roster. So what do we think? At best, 4 or 5 additions if they were to add people to the roster?
That feels like about the number, I would say.
And I think we got to come back to the whole deal. Is it going to be 105? Is Judge Wilkin going to grandfather in some of these players who are already on the roster? There's a lot of variables too. I'm with you. We could see a roadmap to 4 or so if the marketplace is fair, in Florida State's budget for sure.
All right. Yeah. Well, anyway, the portal's always interesting. I don't know how long the spring portal will continue to exist. It does seem like the overlap between spring football and the portal makes just as much sense as the overlap between the playoffs and the portal and this nonsensical thing that the NCAA is doing with the rules. And all it does is remind me that we really need a new governing body for college football, and we need a lot of guardrails on the portal and NIL. We need a salary cap, and whether it's the revenue sharing or NIL, they need to cap them both. We need to get a handle. Now, here's the thing I don't understand. Well, I don't have time to get into it. You guys know I have an appointment at 4:00. We'll talk about this on Friday. But yeah, this is just another nonsensical thing with college football right now.
In theory, the revenue sharing, I know you got to run, Pat. In theory, the revenue sharing is supposed to come with a era where teams have to kind of get all NIL deals beyond the revenue sharing because all players are making money from the university, evaluated by a third party that basically says, yes, this commercial, this whatever is worth that much money and not supposed to just be able to continue. Now, if some teams get restricted from doing that, could they potentially get litigious to try and stop that from happening? Yes. So, like, I'm not sure that comes to pass. But I think part of the idea with the revenue sharing era is trying to nip some of the wild, wild west of NIL in the bud. But again, I'm firmly in the I believe it when I see it, Cam.
Well, I'm with you. I don't know. The Wild Wild West, it took a long time to settle the Wild Wild West,
It didn't happen overnight.
History repeats itself. All right, boys, I'm heading to a meeting. You guys carry on the rest of the show, and we will see you guys on Friday. Some of us, maybe all of us. We'll see what happens with the portal. We'll probably talk more about that. I think Nick's going to join us on Friday for a little more full week recap of recruiting. Now that it's been a little bit slower this week than it has previous weeks, so we will have Nick on, and then I believe Bob or Kurt will join us to recap the first UVA baseball game, which they're going to talk about a little bit more. But I'm going to step out and turn it over to Bob and Kurt, and I will see you guys on Friday. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. All right. We're going to recalibrate here at 3:40 on the East Coast. Kurt Weiler, Bob Ferranti. We got a lot of things we want to cover. We'll kind of maybe go rapid fire here because we want to hit on a little bit of practice. The coordinators spoke Monday night. We got some basketball discussion, baseball discussion. Let's stick football here, Kurt. And I think some of the things I heard from Mike Norvell, I was covering baseball, but I did go back and listen to Mike Norvell, what he said on Tuesday. Sounds like some of these receivers are getting a little bit healthier. LaWayne McCoy is a name that we have not heard a lot about because he's been injured. But let's maybe, give the folks a little bit of an update on where these receivers are and just what Mike Norvell thinks about guys like LaWayne McCoy.
Yeah, it's good, but unfortunate timing in a way that it sounds like both the offensive line room and receiver room are getting healthier after they were so depleted there in the middle of spring. You're towards the end. It sounds like LaWayne and Jaylen Brown were both back out there after missing time. It sounds like even Deuce Robinson was, I think, moving around some was kind of the phrase Mike used. Who knows exactly what that means? He's fairly vague with that type of thing. But, I mean, it's a promising sign that, at the very least, it confirms kind of what has been believed and what's been said all along. If none of these look like serious things that are going to linger into the summer or preseason. It sounds like they'll be full go for summer programs, summer workouts into preseason, which is good. Yeah, I think it sounds like it was a good day for the passing game. I think one of the better passing days and offense days of spring. Norvell said after last night's practice, I think that's encouraging. I mean, LaWayne, it's unfortunate. I think he might have got hurt. Was it first practice out, maybe first or second? It was early in spring he got hurt. And it's unfortunate that I think is a guy who they were high on coming into spring. And we've seen his playmaking ability more at practice than in games. Didn't see it a ton in games, but that he loses this spring. But I think it sounds like has been working hard in still ways he can while sidelined to kind of maximize the time learning a new offense.
And when we talk about receivers being out, there are opportunities for other receivers to try and show what they can do. I think toward the top of the list it's Javon Boggs. I've been calling him Javon Boggs, but Javon Boggs, again, from Cocoa, the very, very productive, not super quick, but very productive, receiver from Cocoa, and who's been I think a guy who maybe you can't plug in and say that's a guy who's going to be 20 catches, 25 catches year one, but he's going to make the most of those opportunities out there. He could be a slot type. We'll see how it all kind of shakes out. But we've heard Boggs' name, I think, quite a bit throughout the spring, familiar with the Gus Malzahn offense. Obviously, Florida State jumped on him. Kurt, you heard Boggs talk a little bit last night. Not arrogant, just confident in what he can bring to the table, a willing learner. I think we kind of heard some good words out of him.
Yeah, I think the thought coming in with Javon, I mean, he's not the freakiest athlete. He's not the guy who's going to make the ridiculous catches, the highlight real plays a ton. He's just kind of a solid receiver, a good route runner, a consistent catcher, does everything very well. And I think that it feels like that's a freshman who's more likely to be able to make an instant impact than maybe a raw guy here. Like that's a high potential guy. I mean, Javon, who was so incredibly productive at Cocoa in high school, it makes sense that it sounds like he's really come in and made an impact this spring. I think obviously the injury situation there in that room has helped give him more reps. And we saw that in the scrimmage. Pat were out there watching. He got targeted quite a bit and got a lot of reps, it looked like, because they were down a few guys, and I think he's maximized that. I think he was a guy who talked the first time we talked to him back in January or February about, I believe I can play early. And I think he has lived up to that and validated that this spring. Or you can make a case he's been talked about probably about as much as any other receiver on the whole team.
And again, that was a guy who I think when Gus Malzahn, Tim Harris make this move to Tallahassee, Boggs is thinking about what works for him. That was kind of a late flip that really made a lot of sense for Florida State. So kind of an interesting thing to just see how that progression goes for him, over the summer and into the fall. And we'll see where the dust settles between the portal, between all the other receivers. There have been some injuries there, but good to hear that a younger guy is contributing and learning. Monday night, fun opportunity. We were, Jerry Cutts and I were sitting there listening to Gus Malzahn, Tony White, John Papuchis. Luke Laux also spoke to probably 400, maybe more, local Florida State, boosters. It was a really fun night. For a lot of us in the media, we heard a lot of these same things, from Gus, from Tony, from JP. So it's not necessarily anything, I would say, newsy, but you get a lot of tone. You get a lot of tone from Gus. It's establishing that run, being physical, downhill run. We heard a lot about Tommy Castellanos, a guy who's been a leader. He's been not just the leader of the offense, but also defense and special teams, trying to just be that voice in various rooms, trying to engage players on and off the field. One of my favorite moments was Tony White talking about Darrell Jackson, being 6'6" and 340, and they often see this big guy racing across the field to try and chase down somebody. He's trying to outrace a linebacker, outrace a DB to go make a play. That's that kind of tone that I think the defensive coaches really, really want to see. Yes, I can hear a lot of people or see a lot of people being skeptical based on what you saw last year, but this is Darrell Jackson coming back for a reason. Mike Norvell and the staff motivating him and saying, don't come back if you're not going to bring it every single day. It sounds like this is I hate to say new and improved Darrell Jackson, an ultra motivated Darrell Jackson, because he could be in the NFL draft. Next week, he could be selected somewhere, probably not very high, honestly, probably not nearly as high as Josh Farmer, who's looked at as a second-round pick right now by a lot of people. But I think Darrell is coming back to accomplish a lot of things on the field, to be close to his family, to really show that he's potentially a first-round type guy. A lot of football to be played, but when you hear good stories, good anecdotes like that on Darrell Jackson, I think that's something you want to bank away as far as an April moment that could kind of show up again in August, September, and down the road. Luke Laux spoke. Luke Laux can talk for a long time, can captivate an audience. There's a ton of charisma there. I know you weren't there, Kurt, but we've had a chance to spend a lot of time with Luke, various settings, on the record, off the record. We had some fun time just talking, getting to understand where he is with this program. But they had a commitment today. Florida State landing a guy from IMG Academy in Cam Miles. I know you've done just a little bit of research on who Cam is, but this feels like a developmental guy for Luke Laux. What is Florida State getting in Cam Miles?
Yeah, I mean, they're getting a guard, which they certainly need more of. I mean, I know Luke made the joke in talking at the booster event. I watched the video, and he made the joke about, I talked about how my guard needs to be the first thing I get, and the first thing I did was find 5 wings or whatever it was. And it has been wing heavy, so guard has been a need. There's a lot of guards they're targeting right now in transfers, and a transfer guy they bring in is probably more the guy who's going to be the starting point guard potentially right away. I know Robert McCray can do some of that, but Cam feels like he's more for sure a developmental piece. I mean, I think his dad played at a pretty high level too, and I think he was committed to Temple until not that long ago. Decommitted, I think, April 1st. It's kind of a day where you don't believe when people decommit, but it was real. And he pretty quickly things moved on the Florida State front. And I think it was the first visit he took after decommitting was to Florida State, and he committed well on his visit. I think as you're going to hear a lot of guys say, Luke Laux's NBA ties and the selling of the NBA vision and knowing what it takes to get guys there and for guys to stay there, not just get there, I think is a big selling point. And I think it's you wonder how much of a role he can have right away, or if he's maybe more stashed for later player. But I think he's made the most of his post-grad year at IMG. I think he graduated high school like a year ago and took a post-grad year, and I think that's prep year has really helped him get to where he is now.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors. We'll wrap up. We got some baseball thoughts for you, a little bit of baseball news as far as how the rotation lines up. Want to give you some updates there and sort of discuss what we saw, what we didn't see out of that Virginia Tech series, what we saw against South Florida, give you a quick preview on Virginia, which is coming up on Thursday. But quick break here. We'll see you on the other side.
Hey, Seminole fans! Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Seminole Sidelines, welcome back, Kurt Weiler. Welcome back to Finn. Good to see you there, Finn.
Yeah, you want to make an appearance.
I've got 3 puppies in the other room, but hey, we've had a good show so far. We've hit on the transfer portal. We've hit on football. We've hit on basketball, softball playing its final regular season series this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and then Easter Sunday. Baseball. And this has been a really weird schedule development, but it kind of shows you how careful you have to be about managing your pitching here. Florida State went up to Virginia Tech, rained down on Friday, so you're forced to play that doubleheader on Saturday. Then you're forced to play on Thursday, Friday, Saturday in this series against Virginia because a lot of the baseball teams don't want to play on the Easter Sunday. So very condensed schedule. Good news is Florida State's pitched really, really well of late. We'll kind of get into that briefly. But Kurt, today you were there talking with Link Jarrett. The pitching rotation is going to shake up just a little bit. The reason why is obviously the schedule, but kind of run through us what it's going to look like Thursday, Friday, Saturday against Virginia.
Yeah, I think they didn't want to kind of put something if they were going to turn Jamie Arnold or Joey Vellini around from starting in that Saturday doubleheader starting Thursday, puts them on 4 days rest. And yeah, there are minor, I guess, injury or concerns there. I mean, they both threw, I think, 98 plus pitches. They both threw a full game. But on top of that, I think it's effectiveness issue. Sounds like it was a big part of the issue of just like, if we're asking someone to turn around on 4 days rest and pitch a full game when they just did that, are they going to be at their best, or can we manage things and make it work better by maybe keeping them in their normal spots and maximizing how much rest they get? And so that means, they're starting John Abraham tomorrow for the series opener tomorrow at 7 p.m. I think that game's on. I think it's ACC Network game 1, ESPN 2 game 2. I think the first 2 are nationally televised, and so John's turned the corner. It's felt like of late. I mean, he started strong. He came into the season strong. Kind of went through a rough patch where he lost the control. He's felt like he's got it back a little bit. I thought he was good last week at Florida. No, 2 weeks. That was actually the Jacksonville game against Florida. I think he's been good his last couple times out. Was very good in the second game of the doubleheader against Virginia Tech over the weekend, and I think he's not stretched out all the way. I think Link kind of put a ceiling at 60 to 70 pitches, but I think the good news for Florida State is if they're having to deal with a bullpen game again in game 1, Mason Martinez hasn't thrown in, it'll be 9 days by Thursday. Chris Kinnear hasn't thrown in 9 days. I mean, how good the pitching staff has been. I mean, they used 6 total pitchers in 3 games at Virginia Tech, and then 3 total pitchers to combine for a 3-hit shutout Tuesday against USF. I think it's been huge for them to kind of give guys who probably could stand to have a rest after they used so much a rest and let them maybe reset a bit before the stretch run of sorts.
Yeah, so Florida State baseball, the season, up, down. I think the losses have looked, pretty ugly, and it kind of makes you concerned, obviously. They haven't lost those, 4-3, 5-4 type of games. They've been kind of those ugly losses. And, Link Jarrett talking Tuesday night about, after that Wake Forest series, there's a lot of looking around and are we capable of kind of finding who we are and being true to who we are. I think what Florida State is a really good baseball team on the mound that is capable of winning 2 out of 3, winning a weekend series. And it's just, can you put everything else together? Look, we didn't see the Saturday games because Virginia Tech wasn't able to make that broadcast. So I think we're going to kind of just say Florida State had great pitching performances. It sounded good. Thank you to Eric Llewellyn. The box scores looked good. The Sunday performance I think I want to hit on was, Wes Mendes, after just some not so good starts. I think it was about 3 in a row where he was just, a lot of walks, a lot of earned runs. He battled. I mean, it didn't look pretty, and there were runners on base, and he was battling the runners in scoring position every inning on Sunday. But he battled and only gave up 1 run in 5.2 innings. It worked out in the end. And like you said, Kurt, you only had to use 6 pitchers the whole weekend. You get a sweep at Virginia Tech, a top 25 team. You get a sweep on the road in the ACC. First time that's happened in about 4 years. I think was that Miami series in 2021 was, the research going back by FSU Sports Information. So things worked out great as far as just Florida State taking care of business up there. And then you get to Tuesday night, and we know Tuesdays have been an adventure for Florida State. But for them to get the pitching, to get the hitting, fielding was phenomenal. If you didn't see the Miles Bailey catch, go out there and find it on Twitter. That was among the best, first baseman running toward the wall catches you'll see. I'm not sure Florida State's played a better 7-inning window of baseball than what we saw Tuesday night. I mean, you can say it's USF and they're not the best team this year. You can say whatever.
They're a good team.
They're a good team. I think Link Jarrett called them a couple times a winning team, which was kind of an awkward way of saying, they've won more than they've lost. But it was a really, really good 7 innings, Kurt.
Yeah, I think Link talked pretty candidly about, when they get up 7-0 in the first inning, that's great. But you absolutely have seen games and will see games where it goes from 7-0 after 1 to 7-5 in the fourth. And you're like, well, did they just use all their offense in that one inning and they don't have anything left? I mean, for them to go, I think it was 7-1, 0-2, and then 8 in the fifth. I mean, it's just like they were just like, it felt like so many of their like runners in scoring position demons getting exercised all in one night. I mean, it was just quite just stacking hits. I mean, I think they put up 8 in the fifth on 8 singles. Like there were no extra base hits. It was just hit. I mean, Chase Williams changes that lineup for sure. He had a few more infield hits. He seems to do that a lot. But I mean, everyone was on it on that night.
USF went to the bullpen in the first inning, and the public address announcer at Hauser went to Kenny Loggins' danger zone right away. And I thought, well played, sir, well played, because that bullpen for the Bulls was just the door was swinging open early and often. Hey, let's hit on Chase Williams just briefly as we're kind of checking out here, almost close to an hour. But what Chase Williams brings to this Florida State baseball team is not just crazy speed. It feels like a different dynamic. Laid down an incredible bunt, scored from second on a single. I think this is a dynamic that Florida State kind of needed in this order, just to bring a little bit more energy just to that lower part of the order. What do you think about what you've seen of Chase, and what do you think he can bring to this team?
Link talked as he got closer to returning from that shoulder injury for sliding headfirst into home again. I think the Georgetown series. He talked about the spark he thought Chase could bring, and I was somewhat. I mean, a guy like a guy who doesn't bring much from the power perspective, who's going to be hitting in the 9-hole or near the bottom of the lineup. I was a little skeptical of that. I'll admit that. I knew the speed was real, but how much does he get hitting the ball? If he's not putting the ball in play, that speed doesn't come into effect, So, but no credit. I mean, it has changed the complexion. I mean, he wasn't hitting 9th last night. Actually, I wonder where he'll settle. But him at 9, paired with Gage at 1 is like a lethal speed combo, flipping over the lineup before you bring up Lodis and Max Williams and Miles Bailey and Kyle Fisher and Farrow, and just that part of the order that can just really mash the ball when they're on it. But I think Link talked yesterday about kind of like his passion is he plays with passion every pitch. I mean, it feels like he pretty much only has one speed. I know made a few defensive plays in left field in his return to action over the weekend too. But I think all around it is more of a game changer than maybe I gave it credit for. And I'll be interested to talk to Chase hopefully soon after a game. I mean, the ways does he have what? I think he might have. Does he have like 5 or 6 hits in his first 4 games back? He had a 2-hit game or 3-hit game last night. I think he might have like 6. I think he had 3 over the weekend in 3 games and 3 last night. So hey, a bunch of those infield singles.
And he's another guy. He's just getting on base. I mean, it feels like this lineup does a great job of not just hits, getting on base. And I mean, it starts, with Gage. It works its way through, Alex Lodis obviously was kind of had that almost a 500 on base percentage for a little while there. What Chase does, this is a lineup that I think we had a ton of questions based on what they lost last year. It hasn't always looked consistently good, but you're seeing that kind of potential up and down the order, what they can offer. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for Wednesday's show. We've hit on a lot of things: transfer portal, football, basketball, baseball. If you're not subscribing to the Osceola on the YouTube channel, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, help us grow. Again, I think Jerry and I promised something special if we hit 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. We'll have to come up with something. We will come up with something. This is like, just on the fly. Every once in a while, I just kind of throw this out there and see if the internet can kind of help us. So, tell your friends, about Seminole Sidelines, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. I know there's some recruiting questions. We've got a lot of recruiting coverage on the site, FloridaState.rivals.com. Some of it interviews from guys who've been at practice, some of it behind the paywall in our Osceola Village message board, some updates about various prospects. Nick Carlisle's tracking a lot of guys as those summer official visits in June are getting a little bit closer and closer. If you're not a subscriber to the website, Osceola 30 free days of the Osceola. Go to FloridaState.rivals.com. Nick Carlisle and Jerry Cutts will be here on Friday with Pat Burnham. They'll talk a little bit of recruiting. They'll talk about some of the things that we're planning on this YouTube channel down the road, some exciting things we're looking forward to sharing with you in the coming weeks. But again, for Pat Burnham, go get that advertising sale, Pat. Thanks for joining us and starting the show. For Kurt Weiler, I'm Bob Ferranti. We'll talk to you soon on Friday. Take care.